What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin, and after Jackie Bradley Jr. went on paternity leave in that Oakland A's series, we saw Jarren Duran for the second time this year. Jarren Duran's second time up here led to a lot of questions and discussions about whether or not Jarren Duran should be on the Red Sox full-time going forward in 2022. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about whether or not I personally think Jarren Duran should be on this Red Sox team, and if so, who would he replace? I also want you guys down below in the comment section to let me know what your thoughts are on Jarren Duran. But I do want to ask, before you type out what your thoughts are, to listen to what I have to say about Jarren Duran before you do that. Before we get into that though, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys are hitting the like button on these videos as well. If you're newly subscribed or currently subscribed, it is the best way to help this channel out, and it would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Before we get into who Duran should replace, we should probably talk about whether or not he should be on the team in general to begin with. And right off the bat, we have to talk about his improvements, because over the last offseason as well as spring training, Jarren Duran spent a lot of time adjusting his approach to at-bats as well as his mechanics at the plate. And both of those things have shown an immediate impact in his game. In fact, he's kind of tearing it up right now. In AAA this year, he is hitting at a .316 average with a .918 OPS and 12 doubles over 37 games. It's a pretty decent stat line. On top of that, when he's been called up to the majors, when he replaced Jackie and when he replaced Kike when they both had to leave for different reasons, and yes, it's only a small sample size, but he's pretty much carried that stat line into the majors. In the majors this year, he's hitting at a .308 clip with an .816 OPS, and on top of that, he has an OPS plus of 130, which means in the 3 games that he did play for the Red Sox, he was 30% better than the rest of the league. We've also already this year seen guys who have completely changed their approach to at-bats and their adjustments at the plate do really well in the majors. I'm talking about Franchy Cordero, who came up last year much like Duran and had a really tough go of it. This year he's come up and been a pretty integral part of this Red Sox offense. So with the changes to Jarren Duran's approach and mechanics at the plate, the obvious and immediate impacts that that's had on his game, as well as the statistics he's put up this year even when he's in the majors, why is Duran sitting in Worcester? That leads me to who Jarren Duran should replace on this Red Sox team. That's kind of a loaded question when you think about it. I know some of you guys are going to go in the comments and say, no, Corbin, it's not a loaded question. The obvious answer is DFA Jackie Bradley Jr. and let this new guy get the chance to shine and prove that he can do it in the MLB, much like Franchy Cordero did with Travis Shaw. The only difference between those two is that this year, Jackie Bradley Jr., who yes, historically has not been a great hitter, is hitting over 200 at 222, and he's also had some really big moments, especially at Fenway Park this year. He has helped us win a lot of games, and not just offensively. We all know the capabilities Jackie Bradley Jr. has in the outfield. The fact that he's always has the capability to be in a Gold Glove conversation. Now that value is really, really high for the Red Sox right now, especially defensively. It's not Travis Shaw and Franchy Cordero, where Travis Shaw added nothing. It's much more complicated with Jarren Duran and Jackie Bradley Jr. If you're not going to replace Jackie Bradley Jr. with Jarren Duran, who else can you replace Jarren Duran with? Well, the other option is to have him as a fourth outfielder, a guy who plays on the bench and comes off the bench in 2 games. That means we have to get rid of someone on our bench. So let's take a look at the bench. We've got Franchy Cordero, who in my opinion isn't going to get replaced with the offensive production he's got going on right now. You've got Kevin Plawecki, who probably won't get replaced with Jarren Duran because he's a catcher. You've got Bob and you've got Arroyo. Those are your only 2 options left. Bobby Dahlbeck has been pretty miserable at the plate this year. He's shown signs and times of greatness, but for the most part, he's been a well below average hitter. The only thing that I have to say about Bobby Dahlbeck, and the reason I don't think Jarren Duran could replace Bob, is because of Bob's defense this year as well. Bobby Dahlbeck isn't hurting anybody on that bench, and he plays when we play against lefties, which Jarren Duran can't do. The other thing that Jarren Duran can't do is come in late into games when we need to get defensive outs at first base. I love what Franchy Cordero has done offensively this year, but we can all be honest with ourselves. He is a below average defender, so late in games, having that option to go to Bobby Dahlbeck, who's been an above average defender this year at first base, is pretty much invaluable when it comes to replacing him with Jarren Duran. The other option, which I've seen a lot of people talk about, is Christian Arroyo, who, like Bobby Dahlbeck, has had a lot of struggles at the plate this year. But there are a couple things with Christian Arroyo who, again, make him pretty invaluable to this Red Sox team. The first is that right now his main duty on this Red Sox team is to be a platoon for Jackie Bradley Jr. Obviously, Jarren Duran can't do that because they're both lefties, and Jarren Duran's not exactly known for his lefty-lefty crimes, so having him as a platoon with another lefty doesn't make a ton of sense. But the main reason Christian Arroyo is so valuable to his team right now is because he's your only utility player. Christian Arroyo can now play almost every single position on an MLB diamond besides catcher and pitcher now that he has experience in the outfield. That's pretty important, especially later in the year when guys need rest or guys are still kind of nursing injuries to get back to health. Heaven forbid someone gets injured and Christian Arroyo has to take on a full-time position. You can't exactly replace him with Jarren Duran and say our second baseman gets hurt. You can't plug Jarren Duran in at second base. So in my opinion, Christian Arroyo doesn't make sense to be replaced by Jarren Duran either. So if there aren't any options for Jarren Duran to replace, then how does Jarren Duran get onto this team this year? For those of you who don't know, when the lockout ended and spring training began, the MLB realized that teams are going to need a little extra help because of the shortened spring training, so they expanded rosters. And once they contracted those rosters, they left you with the ability to have an extra pitcher than you normally do. Normally in years past, you can only have 13 pitchers on your staff. This year, so far, you can have 14. Well, it's going to change on June 19th. That rule is going to go back into effect where you have to have 13 pitchers on your roster, meaning that one pitcher on this team is going to be gone June 19th. But what this does mean is that there is now room for a position player to make their way up to the big leagues, aka Jarren Duran. Because in my opinion, if you're the Red Sox, this makes a ton of sense. Whether you're planning on starting him full-time next year or being a trade piece at the deadline, Jarren Duran right now adds speed, he adds offensive contact, he adds a little bit of offensive power, and he adds decent defense to your bench that you didn't usually have, especially that lefty contact in late games, as well as that speed, which the Red Sox have been pretty much lacking for the last couple of years. Now they have Cordero and they have Story, but you still have a lot of guys in that lineup who aren't exactly known for their speed on the base paths. The other thing that I've been saying for a while now, and what I'll probably say again when we're talking about other prospects in the future, is that I would rather have our prospects, especially younger prospects, regardless of how well they're doing, play every day in the minors as opposed to be a bench bat in the majors. But in the case of Jarren Duran has had a lot of time in the minors. He's aged out of the prospect category, and in my opinion, he is best served on this Red Sox team on that bench, helping them in late innings, either on the base pass, in the box, or on the field. Again, regardless of whether or not you think he's going to be a trade deadline piece or a starter next year, you and I think can both agree that he would be impactful on this Red Sox team in that role. Besides that, the only other way, in my opinion, that Jarren Duran makes his way onto this club is if Jackie Bradley Jr. either gets really seriously injured, which I really hope doesn't happen, or he starts stinking up the joint, and I'm talking about stinking it up so bad he's reaching Travis Shaw levels. Those are the only two options, in my opinion, to see Jarren Duran on this team. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of Jarren Duran, because I know there are people out there who would rather have Jarren Duran on here than any of the guys that I named, that they think he is the impact player the Red Sox are looking for, and they don't really care who he has to replace, they just want him on this team. There are also guys like me who would like to see Jarren Duran do well on the Red Sox and thinks he has potential to be a good player for the Red Sox, but you need to make sure you're methodically putting him into this lineup where you're not causing struggles for another part of this team. And there's a third category who doesn't think Jarren Duran should be up here at all, who thinks Jarren Duran should be a trade piece, who thinks Jarren Duran is past his prime and doesn't have what it takes, a journeyman, if you will. Let me know where you fall on Jarren Duran down below. As always, if you've made it to the end of these videos, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Like I said at the beginning, if you are new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys are hitting the like button on these videos as well. Again, if you are newly subscribed or currently subscribed, it is the best way to help this channel out, and it would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seats.